February 6th, Mew gave birth. We named the newborn Mewtwo. You know what that means? It's Mewtwo's birthday! There's been a lot of hype with Mewtwo lately. It's 2015, which means that at some point this year we'll be getting that Super Smash Bros. Mewtwo DLC. And it got me thinking, Mewtwo really is an incredibly prominent character within the Pokemon universe. Aside from Pikachu, who's clearly the series mascot, I'd argue that Mewtwo is the most explored and fleshed out character Pokemon has ever created. To celebrate Mewtwo's birthday, we're going to take a look at the many faces of Mewtwo and how its multiple entries within the Pokemon world have turned it from the original boss into a Pokemon legend. Within the first generation of games, Mewtwo plays the role of the final boss, even beyond the Elite Four. At level 70, it's the highest level encounter you'll find originally, and you can't even attempt to find it until you've defeated the Elite Four first. Stat-wise, Mewtwo was a set standard that wouldn't be passed for 10 years. The golden legendary standard of 680 total stat points. But on top of that, the Psychic type was by far the best in the first generation too. It's weak to Bug and, just Bug. From a design standpoint, Mewtwo kind of breaks the game. And honestly, this lines up perfectly within the most important part of Mewtwo's introduction in Red and Blue, the lore. Mewtwo and Mew are the only Pokemon in the original games with any kind of extended backstory. It's still to this day one of the darkest tales in Pokemon history. Through cryptic hints in the Pokemon Mansion, we learn that Mewtwo is an artificially created Pokemon built in a lab, which over time became too powerful for its creators. Its original Pokedex entry is also pretty morbid. It was created by a scientist after years of horrific gene splicing and DNA engineering experiments. It's also interesting to note that the creator of Mewtwo is singular, just one scientist. There's a lot of data throughout the Pokemon universe that suggests the creator of Mewtwo is none other than Mr. Fuji, the kindly old man who takes in orphan Pokemon. It seems that after learning the limits of trying to control nature, Fuji secludes himself to a life of hospitality in hopes to atone for his sins. Aside from the first generation, the next time we see Mewtwo make a main appearance again is in X and Y. It has zero story impact whatsoever, but Mewtwo still functions similarly to its original appearance. Once again, it's part of a cave that can only be explored after you've beaten the Elite Four. And once again, Mewtwo sets a new record for stat total. In Diamond and Pearl, Arceus passed up Mewtwo's stat standard of 680 with 720. This was finally passed at the release of X and Y Mega Evolutions, where both Mega Mewtwo X and Mega Mewtwo Y were given the massive base set total of 780. While Mega Rayquaza has since tied this number, it's no secret that Game Freak wants to keep their Mewtwo powerful after all these years. They even used Mewtwo as the very first reveal of a Pokemon Mega Evolution, before we even knew what Mega Evolution was. But outside of the main series games, Mewtwo still has a constant presence throughout the spin-off titles as well. In most of its appearances, Mewtwo is used as a final boss. In Pokemon Stadium, the final boss is Mewtwo. Not like a trainer with Mewtwo, just like Mewtwo with really good stats and attacks. One Mewtwo. In Pokemon Stadium 2, the final boss is actually a person, but he does carry Mewtwo as one of his 3 Pokemon. Pokemon Pinball, the final bonus stage is Mewtwo, and he drops by far the biggest score bonus in the game. Pokemon Puzzle League, you'll have to beat Mewtwo. Pokemon Ranger Guardian Signs, you'll have to beat Mewtwo. Twice. In Smash Bros. Melee, Mewtwo joins the fight, showcasing a display of teleportation, Shadow Ball, confusion, and telepathic powers whenever it holds an item. Shockingly, unlike its Pokemon game legacy, Mewtwo is actually one of the slowest and weakest characters in the game competitively. While Mewtwo does have more minor roles in other games, the fact stands, Mewtwo has a huge presence throughout. Arguably Mewtwo's greatest impression on a major Pokemon media form, though, is the anime. Mewtwo's appearance represents something terrifying. It's mysterious, ruthless, and so powerful that it wipes out entire Pokemon teams at once. The television show develops the plot of the mysterious Mewtwo as a rogue weapon commissioned by Team Rocket that escapes, which eventually becomes the sinister and eventually philosophical Mewtwo that we've come to know and love from the film, Mewtwo Strikes Back. Many know the story of Mewtwo in the first film, and I won't go too deep into it, but perhaps one of the most interesting things to come out of that film is a 10-minute short that serves as an introduction. This short is one of my favorite elements from the Pokemon anime period, and it's called The Birth of Mewtwo in Japan. We'd later get it as a DVD bonus from a future film in the States under the title The Uncut Story of Mewtwo's Origin. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. Crazy enough, before this was an anime short, it began as a radio drama that aired in Japan leading up to the premiere of the first movie. I didn't even realize radio dramas were still a thing. The birth of Mewtwo serves as a backdrop of its creation. Dr. Fuji is a tragic figure. He attempts to clone his deceased daughter, Amber in the English dub, and is driven nearly mad in his attempt to save her. His wife leaves him, and he ends up working with Team Rocket on the Mewtwo experiment, using the funding to revive his daughter on the side. The short focuses on a young Mewtwo in a test tube, and its telepathic interactions with the other test tube clones. It's a highly emotional and surreal experience, and unlike most anything you'll find in the Pokemon anime today, Mewtwo begins life as curious and naive, very much like the Mew that we see from the first film. When the other clones perish in the experiments, we get a taste of the rage and power within Mewtwo, possibly heightened when Mewtwo is administered a drug by the team. Without this short, Mewtwo's immediate loathing of the world and murder of its creators makes it seem like a cliché villain, but the birth of Mewtwo short, in a strange way, humanizes it. Oh man, am I rambling? Sorry, I just really love that short, and I highly encourage that you check it out. This same Mewtwo returns in the first television special, Mewtwo Returns. Oh. This hour-long special is mostly just a large battle between the clones and Giovanni, but it paints Mewtwo once again as a much more sentient being, struggling to find meaning in the world for it and its fellow clones. Here, Mewtwo functions more as a tribal chief than a dictator. Mewtwo has brief appearances in the movie and anime past this. In a cape. Why in a cape? Because it's mysterious. Mewtwo's next appearance is at the simple final boss in 2006's Mastermind a Mirage Pokemon, another anime television special. This Mewtwo is just a hologram, but it goes to show that even a decade into the game's history, and right within the Ruby and Sapphire arc, Mewtwo is still a huge presence. This is also the last non-flashback appearance of Misty. Mewtwo's next appearance was recent, in 2013's Genesect movie. This Mewtwo is for some reason a completely separate Mewtwo from the one in the originals. This time, this Mewtwo is experimented on by cruel humans, destroys the lab, and escapes. Are we sure that this is a different Mewtwo? The deeper things go, the more they do change. This Mewtwo is quite a bit more compassionate all around, and is simply distrusting of humans rather than outright loathing them. It's also voiced by a female this time, as opposed to a male. This Mewtwo is also the first Pokemon in the anime to Mega Evolve. And then there's the Mewtwo in the Pokemon Origins special. Here, Mewtwo is identical to its first generation appearance, and this special even directly plays into the clues dropped that Mr. Fuji is the man that created Mewtwo in the first place. Mewtwo has even seen its fair share of success in the Pokemon TCG. Here are a few of my favorites. While base set Mewtwo is underwhelming, the movie promo Mewtwo saw a ton of play as a Hitmonchan counter in the early TCG days. Rocket's Mewtwo, while not exceptional competitively, was the first Pokemon TCG card to have 3 attacks. Mewtwo Level X and its Psy Barrier Pokebody made it a strong tech play as a counter in the basic heavy SP metagame of its era. And the next Destiny's Mewtwo EX defined a new era of extremely powerful basic EX Pokemon cards, with extremely high damage output and easy splashability in a variety of decks. In 2012, there were 3 or more Mewtwo EX used in the winning World Championship deck for all 3 divisions. You'll even still see it splashed occasionally in today's current competitive metagame. If we're going really obscure, we can even include Pokemon Live, a bizarre live-action Pokemon musical that originated in the United States in the year 2000. In this show, Giovanni creates Mecha Mewtwo, an unstoppable robot Pokemon capable of learning every attack. It barely resembles a Pokemon, looks more like something from the early Power Rangers, but it is defeated. By who else than Mewtwo himself, who beats him with an attack full of love.
Hey man, don't look at me, I didn't write it.
And finally, digging deep in our celebration of all things Mewtwo is the manga. There are a few adaptations that include Mewtwo, but my personal favorite is the long-running Pokemon Adventures manga. In this version, it isn't Dr. Fuji that creates him, but Blaine. In a bizarre twist, Blaine and Mewtwo share some DNA, giving Blaine a freaky Princess Mononoke-like arm that allows him to sense Mewtwo telepathically. Also, Mewtwo always carries a giant spoon with it, for some reason.
I like cereal.
And if you want to see Mewtwo like you've never seen him before, look no further than the Pokemon Pocket Monsters manga, a popular comedy-based manga that still runs in Japan, and saw a brief English translation in Singapore. Mewtwo begins as his usual ruthless self, this time created by Bill of all people, when he is forced to by Giovanni. Oh yeah, by the way, this is Bill. The main series gag character, Clefairy, steals Mewtwo's DNA, calling himself Mew3, before trolling Mewtwo into defeat. Then, in a later episode, Mewtwo gets Clefairy's DNA. This turns Mewtwo into an obnoxious Mewtwo-Clefairy hybrid, doing things like this and this. You know what? I think we're done here. Happy birthday, Mewtwo! never change. Seriously, never change. Except in Smash Bros. It would be awesome if you were good in the new Smash Bros. Thanks for watching today's Nintendo Fact video. If you want to catch some other Pokemon Fact videos that we've done in the past, you can check those out up here. Also, if you enjoyed this video, consider clicking the like button or subscribing to let YouTube know that you'd like to see more videos like this one. I'll be back soon with more Pokemon content.